Hi folks, John Dunn here, RPG freelancer, publisher behind Melia. I'm up here today at Immortals with Mikey.
What is up, John? It's been a minute, man. How are you doing?
It's a little toasty out there right now.
It is. We love it.
You'll probably drop this video in like January.
Yeah, I'll probably
right
drop
now
it.
It's hot.
I was thinking about late March, but yeah,
Okay,
right now
perfect.
it is summer, so it's good.
So I thought we'd talk about something kind of spooky today.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like so foreign that we talk about something spooky.
Yeah, well, we do touch on those topics from time to time. This book's kind of unique though, because it is an RPG supplement, but it's kind of an art book too.
Really?
Yeah, so this is one that I noticed we have on the shelves, and it's for a game system that we sold a while ago and sold through it, and I'm kind of surprised we still have this without it. This is Absinthe and Carcosa. It's a source book for the King in Yellow role-playing game from Pelgrane. We're currently sold out of the actual King in Yellow RPG, but we still have a couple of copies of this, and honestly, I might snag one of them because it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So this is by Dean Englehart and Robin Laws. Robin Laws we've talked about before. He's kind of the mastermind behind the Gumshoe system, which Pelgrane used for Trail of Cthulhu, and I believe for their King in Yellow RPG as well. Englehart's done a lot of Cthulhu-related work. This came about because of a 2017 Kickstarter. They had about 2,300 backers and raised about 167,000 pounds.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty successful Kickstarter. And that's partly because of the folks involved and partly because it was for the King in Yellow. Now, we've talked about the King in Yellow before. I don't know if you remember that, Mikey.
Vaguely.
All right, so it was one of the very first podcasts that we recorded. We talked about the King in Yellow, and we talked about the campaign for Delta Green, Impossible Landscapes, that focused on the King in Yellow. And the King in Yellow is kind of a manifestation of one of Lovecraft's cosmic entities, kind of based on an anthology written by Robert Chambers back in 1895. That's out in the public domain now. And that anthology talked about a play that was being performed in Paris and how a lot of artists reacted to it in, let's diplomatically say, unusual ways.
Yeah.
Kind of went nuts.
Always.
Right?
Always.
Yeah. And when Lovecraft wrote The Whisperer in Darkness, he kind of rolled the unspeakable one as a manifestation of the King in Yellow into his mythos. And the play was kind of a framing aspect that showed up in the King in Yellow anthology. And that same framing aspect kind of played a big part in Impossible Landscapes. And I assume it does in the King in Yellow role-playing game. I haven't actually read the main rule book for that. One other source material rather, that people who are interested in this might want to check out is also the HBO series True Detective. Have you seen that?
I've heard of it, never watched it though.
Right, so
How is it?
The first season of that has some very strong Lovecraft themes, and some of them really do touch on the King in Yellow. I definitely recommend checking that out if this is up your alley.
And what was that called again?
True Detective.
True Detective. Okay.
Yeah, definitely worth checking out. Really fun show. First thing about this is it talks about absinthe. You familiar with absinthe?
Not really. I mean, I've heard of absinthe. I should probably know what it is, but I don't know right now.
So it's a drink,
Okay.
right? It's a liqueur.
Yep.
Okay. And it's a liqueur that was actually illegal completely in the U.S. from 1912 to 2007.
Dude, what?
Yeah.
All the way up until 2007?
All the way up until 2007. And in fact...
Why'd they unleash it?
And in fact, the version that we can now import into the U.S. Is kind of diluted, right? So it's a liqueur that's based on anise and wormwood.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's called the Green Fairy. And when people would drink absinthe, and if they would drink absinthe in absinthe houses, and if you have a chance, you might want to check out the elaborate rituals of preparation that could go into absinthe back in the turn of the century days before it was made illegal in the U.S. because
it's like real stuff. Like,
yeah. So you'd have a spade that you'd set on top of your glass, and you'd ignite a sugar cube that you'd pour the absinthe over. It's pretty wild.
Dude, I mean.
But it was made illegal because people thought wormwood would make you go insane, right? So that's why you can't import it. And the amount of wormwood that's actually... So there's a psychedelic called Thuhone, and I may be mangling that pronunciation, that Wormwood produces. The amount that probably makes it into Absinthe isn't really likely to be enough to have that much of an effect, and the stuff that's coming into the U.S. now has to be Tuhone free, so it doesn't have that psychedelic compound of Wormwood.
People are probably just super drunk.
Pretty much. I mean, like any other liqueur, you drink enough of it, you're going to get drunk before you have other consequences, right?
Right.
So why am I talking about this? Well, first off, absinthe is in the name, right? This is Absinthe in Carcosa. But the second part is because the whole framing mechanism for this book is that it's a scrapbook, right? So this is done up like it was a scrapbook that was assembled by an art student who was living in Paris right around 1900, so the turn of last century. And he cut out a lot of materials from various books and then added his own artwork and annotations throughout.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, so it's kind of, an in-world artifact, right? So if you're running a campaign that could be set in Carcosa, this might be a book that you just hand to the players and say, you found this.
Hey, you found something here.
Right. Or maybe their campaigns building up to go to Carcosa, like might happen in Impossible Landscapes, or if you're running the King in Yellow campaign. Again, they found this book and they could, leverage a lot of things in here. It might mean that you're going to lead into some kind of off-the-cuff adventures as you as the game master need to react to the things that they find in here and how they interpret those. But I think that opens up just a vast amount of potential. It is a city guide to Carcosa told from the perspective of this art student who was, very much a drunk art student and very likely drunk on absinthe, right? There's all kinds of marginalia throughout here. There's instances of the yellow sign being drawn in it. A lot of this was actually assembled from historic public domain materials. So the creators sat down and looked through old, travel guides to Paris and artwork from that period and said, oh, this is in the public domain. I can do things with this, and kind of assembled that and then added in their own marginalia and mythos-themed materials to really compile into this very cool book.
It's a lot of work.
It's a ton of work, yeah. And going back to those sources and finding it was not trivial. But I do feel like it is as much an art book as it is a game source book. So if you are, into this genre, even if you don't have any intention of playing the game, it's just a fun book to flip through and look at and go, ooh, here's a cool idea. And I think in many ways, you could drive your own campaign forward just flipping through the pages, stopping at one and saying, okay, here's, 10 different plot hooks I can do things with. Because it is created by somebody who is in the throes of insanity and alcoholism, it's very subjective, right? So yeah, this guy may have had some level of enlightenment into the way the King in Yellow was doing things. So some of it might be accurate, but you as the game master could also say, yeah, this part's garbage. This was just, he was nuts. And so that can really confuse your players because they don't know which elements have to be true and which ones aren't. And the foreword to the book even kind of talks about that a little bit. Notes the author doesn't remember writing parts of it. So maybe he was divinely inspired, or maybe he was just on a bender.
Just off that absinthe, that sweet old absinthe.
The game master probably needs to sit down and read this first before unleashing his players on it so that maybe he or she has some idea where they want to go with it. But, there's something to be said for reacting spontaneously to things. And the other element of this is if you wanted to use it in multiple campaigns, what was true in one doesn't have to be true in the other, and of course, vice versa. There are neighborhoods and points of interest that are spelled out. Like I said, there's vast amounts of plot hooks. There's kind of even too much to summarize in this book. It's really you need to see this and flip through it and see it for yourself because it's just cool on every page with tons of stuff going on, a million moving parts, and a lot of them that move in concert and others that are very much independent notions.
I'm sure some of it's even very comedic from like the what he puts in there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to mention there aren't really any game mechanics in here. It's just kind of the book cover and a little bit of the mock-up work that sets it up as material for the King in Yellow. If you put a dust jacket over this, possibly one of your own design, you could very easily make this just look like somebody's journal.
True.
It would be pretty straightforward to do that. You could probably hit, Five Below and pick up back to school supplies.
Get a paper bag, just put it all over the front.
Any of those effects, and really it becomes a perfect handout for the game as an in-game artifact at that point. So this is published by Pelgrane. I know I mentioned that before. It was a 2018 release. It is full color. It is a hardcover. It's about 180-ish pages, $35. We've got it up here on the shelf at Immortals Inc. or available at immortalsinc.com.
Well said, John. Come check it out for yourselves. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Good gaming, folks.